Welcome to Mystic Realms Recap. Links are in the description below. Please show some love to the author and me. On to the show. For the Titans, the Titan language was their native language, and rule power was their natural talent. This was also why the Titans were so terrifying. The High Elves only claimed that they were gods, while the Titans were the universally acknowledged gods. How did you come to this conclusion? If it had really been the ruins of Titans, the High Elves would have snatched the treasure in there already. Cheyenne asked in disbelief. After all, the ruins of the Titans were still tempting even for legendary mages. Not to mention if they could find any treasures inside, just obtaining some Titan writings from the ruins would be very beneficial for a legendary mage. Of course, the level of difficulty would be even higher if it was really the ruins of the Titans. The magewords that human inscribers used were actually derived from the Titans' writing. Hence, the Titans' written language could be considered a powerful mageweth itself. To use a brief example to illustrate this, the word fire in Titan writings was already a powerful fire element mageweth even without any core energy source. If it was just normal mageweths, the power of these mageweths would decrease after tens of thousands of years due to the deterioration of core energy even if the mageweth was still intact. However, the Titans' writing applied rule power directly, and didn't rely on any magical beasts' magical crystals for core energy. Therefore, if the Immortal King's treasure was really found in the ruins of the Titans, the dangers the team would face on the way would be far greater. This ruins of the Titans were already recorded in the High Elves' print. This is enough to prove that the High Elves had discovered this place. However, the strange thing is that none of the many old texts from the Dark Age mentioned anything about any activities of the High Elves in the ruins. It's as if they have neglected this place completely. Borg was also unsure himself. After all, the ruins of the Titans were definitely a rare treasure even for the High Elves. Thus, there was no reason why the High Elves would leave the treasure untouched like this given their long rule over Amril. Unless someone that the High Elves didn't dare to offend had taken over the ruins already. Although Osric had explored the Higa mountain range before writing the adventure diary, he was unlikely to be the one given his status among the High Elves then, said Cheyenne contemplatively. The Immortal King? Cheyenne and Borg uttered the legendary name simultaneously with rare tacit understanding. The Immortal King's treasure and the ruins of the Titans weren't mutually exclusive. Meanwhile, the High Elves didn't dare to offend only the Immortal King during the Dark Age, when Amril was ruled by the High Elves. Moreover, why would Osric leave such a detailed entry about his adventures in the Higa mountain range without mentioning anything about taking the treasure away? It was definitely because of the Immortal King. No, Osric certainly wouldn't have left the treasure like this if he had really found this ruins. Even if he hadn't taken it away because of the Immortal King's presence, he would have done so after the Immortal King left Amril. Cheyenne couldn't help but frown. Although the pieces were coming together, Cheyenne felt less optimistic about this expedition. Borg looked equally uneasy. He glanced at the several people in the tent, and said, "There's only one possibility, then." Osric knew the location of the treasure, but didn't take it away, because he knew that he didn't have the ability to get it. The atmosphere in the tent was a little tense. None of them, including Lin Li, was unfamiliar with the formidable Osric who lived during the Dark Age. Before Osric had become the High Lord, he might not have had the ability to get the Immortal King's treasure. However, be it his own powers or those of his subordinates, they were all extraordinary after Osric had become the High Lord, especially the Magic Legion, which made people turn pale just by hearing its name. Its power wasn't on the same level as that of the present-day factions like the Manhwa family or the Dark Blade. Osric had used such power to invade the Endless Abyss and seal numerous powerful Lords of Nightmares in the summoning lamps. However, even he didn't touch the treasure in the Higa mountain range. This just showed that even Osric was unable to obtain both the ruins and the treasure at the peak of his abilities. After a moment of silence, Borg mockingly asked Cheyenne, "What do you think, Cheyenne? Is it getting quite tough? I won't laugh at you if you want to pull out." Cheyenne glanced at Borg and the other two leaders of the Dark Blade. He suddenly thought of something, and sneered, aren't you afraid that I'll wipe out your old nest if I pull out now? Stop talking nonsense. Where did you even get your information from? How can you be so sure that it's definitely the ruins of the Titans? I'm not sure if you've heard of this name before, Pantheon. Borg was joking just now. After all, it didn't hurt to have more manpower in order to get the immortal king's treasure, even if the collaborator was his old enemy. Moreover, Borg wouldn't let Cheyenne pull out like this. Although all the elites were gathered here, the damage they would suffer should their old nest be wiped out was still huge. Pantheon? Cheyenne was stunned for a moment, and asked, could it be that the Titans? Indeed, we found some old text about the Pantheon through some channels. The texts mentioned that the Haiga mountain range used to be within the sphere of the Pantheon's influence. There's even a shrine hidden in the Haiga mountain range. After cross-referencing the information with that found in the treasure map, we came up with the speculation that the immortal king's treasure is likely to be in this shrine. Lin Li, who had been silently sitting at the side for a while, wasn't calm at all now. However, he was more excited than worried. After all, his goal was very simple, to obtain the sealed thunderbolt and whatever was used to seal it. However, he hadn't expected the immortal king's treasure to be hidden in the ruins of the Titans. Still, Lin Li was quite doubtful when Borg mentioned Pantheon. After all, he had spent most of his time learning about magic after coming to Anrel, and didn't know much about these rumors about the ancient times. Cheyenne nodded, and turned towards Lin Li, but then saw some doubt in Lin Li's eyes. Thinking that this genius legendary mage was still too young, Cheyenne smiled, and said, Master Felix seems to be unaware of Pantheon. Actually, very few people know about it now since it's so ancient, and even records about it have been fragmented due to war. Speaking of this, Cheyenne briefly told Lin Li what he knew about Pantheon. During the prehistoric times, the entire Anrel was like a playground for magical beasts, and was filled with ferocious prehistoric magical beasts. The Titans were one of the most powerful races during the prehistoric times. Because they were only one of the most powerful races, they weren't able to rule over the entire continent like the High Elves. The Titans had an enemy that was as powerful as them, the ancient dragons. Speaking of the powerful ancient dragons, they were even more famous than the Titans. This didn't mean that they were stronger than the Titans, but any magical beast that possessed the blood of the ancient dragons was feared by everyone now. On the other hand, the descendants of the Titans were said to be the dwarves and giants. The giants were still quite similar to the Titans, but many couldn't figure out how the dwarves had come about. Compared to the war between the Titans and dragons during the prehistoric times, the Anrel at the end of the Dark Age seemed to be a peaceful world. Throughout the Dark Age and the end of the Dark Age, when fighting was the most frequent, the High Elves, humans, and other races still often compromised temporarily in exchange for a period of peace. However, there wasn't even a moment of peace between the ancient dragons and the Titans. An aspect council that comprised 5 dragon aspects led the entire population. However, nobody knew if there was any dragon more powerful than these 5. On the other hand, the Pantheon which led the Titans was much more mysterious than the Aspect Council. The war between these two powerful races lasted throughout the prehistoric times till both were severely weakened, and the High Elves took the chance to defeat them after paying an enormous price. Only then did these two races finally disappear from Anrel, and the Dark Age, marked by the rule of the High Elves, had begun. After hearing Cheyenne's description, Lin Li nodded with gratitude. He was also very interested in the ruins of the Titans in the Haiga mountain range. Be it the immortal king or Juresco, it wasn't an easy task to seal Thunderbolt, which was one of the 7 pieces of the debris of the stars. Therefore, the ruins of the Titans probably played an important role in this. Lin Li wasn't particularly interested in the treasure, because the Tower of Dusk wasn't short of money like when it had just been established anymore. It had now stepped into a healthy developmental stage, and completely broke off its reliance on the wealth brought about by rare treasures. However, since it was the ruins of the Titans, or rather the ruins left behind by the Pantheon, it was rather interesting for him as a mage. The Manhwa family found Osric's adventure diary, which could hugely decrease the quest's risk, while the Dark Blade's speculations weren't just speculations. Lin Li was clear that no matter his old ally the Manhwa family or the new ally the Dark Blade, both concealed some information. However, this wasn't important. After all, who didn't have some secrets? This was an unspoken fact, and wasn't a matter of right or wrong. Whoever let out all that they had during a collaboration was too naive and foolish. Several thoughts flashed across Lin Li's mind, and he found that nobody in the tent spoke anymore. The three chiefs of the Dark Blade and Cheyenne all stared at Lin Li. Clearly, since these two factions had shared some information about the treasure, it was now Lin Li's turn to share something valuable. It was normal for them to think so. Although Lin Li had the original copy of the treasure map, these two factions also had the treasure map now. To put it more bluntly, the map couldn't show his value by now. Haha, I was thinking about the Pantheon since it's my first time hearing about it. Sorry about it. I'm very inspired by what Master Cheyenne and Master Borg have said. After putting the pieces together, I have some answers to my previous questions. Let me share some of my thoughts with you. Although Lin Li couldn't tell them of the presence of Thunderbolt, it wasn't difficult for him to tell them something they deemed valuable after holding on to the treasure map for so long. Lin Li sounded cautious and humble, yet quite confident. This made Borg and his companions rather doubtful. Honestly, Borg didn't think that this young legendary mage could share any valuable information. Although the Tower of Dusk was very famous in the Breezy Plains recently, it was still just a small faction established less than a year ago, and didn't match the Dark Blade or the Manhwa family in terms of power. This wasn't because they were underestimating Lin Li, but rather because it was a fact. Though the Tower of Dusk and Lin Li had remarkable achievements now, many things still needed to be accumulated with time. The Manhwa family had gotten Osric's adventure diary because of the connections that the Manhwa family had built up in the Breezy Plains. The Dark Blade started off as a bandit group and wasn't very welcome in the Breezy Plains. However, most factions were wary of the Darkness Shrine behind them. This was also why they could get information about the ruins of the Titans. What did the Tower of Dusk have? Even this young president had only come to the Breezy Plains just a year ago. The Tower of Dusk was well known in the Breezy Plains now. This young genius president was also remarkable to reach the legendary realm at the age of 20. However, this young genius president hadn't even known about the Pantheon until just now. What kind of amazing thoughts could he have about the ruins of the Titans? Compared to Borg's doubts, Cheyenne's eyes lit up, and he looked at Lin Li with anticipation. After this period of working with Lin Li and discussing magic together, Cheyenne had a totally new understanding of this young legendary mage. This young legendary mage had achievements that many people of his age couldn't reach, but he wasn't proud and arrogant about achieving a little like most ordinary youngsters. This was extremely valuable for a young person. Cheyenne smiled, and said to Lin Li, I've known that your knowledge about the ruins wasn't less than mine back when I visited you at the Tower of Dusk and heard you say the Haiga mountain range in High Elf's language. He was also saying this to the people from the Dark Blade. Lin Li smiled without commenting on anything, and organized his thoughts. Then, he said, although the original copy of the treasure map is with me, it looks like this didn't delay your research. I think that the first thing you've analyzed when you got this treasure map from me was the map itself. Hearing that Lin Li mentioned the treasure map again, Cheyenne was rather embarrassed that his side had leaked the treasure map. However, he also knew that Lin Li wouldn't bother about this problem, and thought about his copy of the map. He said, Master Felix, are you talking about the map that appears to be a city's map? Rather than the thousands of high elves print on the treasure map, what occupied the most space was an actual map. Like what Lin Li had said, both Cheyenne and Borg had analyzed the map first as it was more important. However, they didn't get anything useful after comparing it to many maps of the Amril world. Therefore, they turned to the High Elf's print, hypothesized that the treasure was located in the Haiga mountain range, and drew out the real treasure map. Although they had already found the probable location of the treasure or the ruins, they were still bothered by the fact that they couldn't find anything useful from the map itself. This was because they knew that though the High Elves loved to use florid language, they wouldn't put two totally unrelated things together. Hence, these words had to be somehow linked to the map. The map seems to be a city's map. I suspect that it may be the internal map of the ruins of the Titans, said Borg doubtfully. He didn't really believe it, either. Impossible. Judging by the body size of the Titans, the area of the city would be huge if it was really a Titan city. Probably 10 Amidst cities won't match the size of this city. Even the Higa mountain range wouldn't be able to conceal such an enormous city for so long. Unsurprisingly, Cheyenne wasn't polite at all to repudiate Borg's speculation. In the current Amril, only the giants resembled the Titans slightly. However, real Titans were so huge that giants looked like little kids compared to them, not mentioning the dwarves. Just a sleeping area of a Titan was enough for 3 human families to live in. This is obviously not a Titan city, but a High Elf city, said Lin Li slowly. High Elves? The legendary masters looked at one another. Was Lin Li saying that a High Elf city was hidden in the ruins of the Titans? Didn't that mean the High Elves had explored the ruins already? Would they still get anything from there? Even if they could get anything, it would be much less valuable than the ruins of the Titans. Even if it's a High Elven city, it's a rather big city, judging from the map. How could it remain hidden in the Higa mountain range for such a long time? Moreover, at the end of the Dark Age, the coalition of various races fought against the High Elves. How would they miss out on this city? With the hatred everyone had for the High Elves, those High Elves would have been affected even if they had hidden in Higa mountain range. Borg obviously didn't believe Lin Li. Indeed, the reason why the era ruled by the High Elves was known as the Dark Age was because of their high-handed rule, which brought endless darkness for all other races. The accumulated hatred finally exploded at the end of the Dark Age, and the coalition between races killed every High Elf that came in their way. The god of mages Juresko even destroyed the Tree of Eternity. Under such circumstances, how could a High Elven city escape being wiped out by the coalition? Although the Higa mountain range was full of dangers, it only applied to ordinary people. To some sanctuary realm masters like Juresko, it was really nothing. If it was really a High Elven city, it's impossible that texts from the Dark Age would never mention it. Even the sky castles of the High Elves didn't escape the fate of destruction during that era. Cheyenne sighed when he spoke of that era he had never experienced. However, with his current power, he probably wouldn't have the right to participate in the battles against the sky castles during the Dark Age full of heroes. Lin Li wasn't displeased with the doubts he faced from the legendary masters. Instead, he smiled, and continued, from what I know, the High Elves built 7 sky castles in total. During the war, the sky castles were destroyed one by one, but only the 7th sky castle didn't appear at all. The legendary masters' expressions changed upon hearing this. Although they had never been through the war at the end of the Dark Age, there were a lot of descriptions about the sky castle in texts from that time period. The powerful sky castles were a devastating force for the coalition. If the dwarves hadn't built Skybreaker successfully, and Juresko hadn't had a breakthrough in his abilities just in time, history would have been completely different from what it was now. Do you mean? The ruins contain the 7th sky castle? Although legendary powerhouses wouldn't have strong emotions usually, the legendary masters still couldn't help feeling rather excited when talking about the sky castles. With the improvement in design, each sky castle that the immortal king built was more powerful than the last. This 7th sky castle was certainly the most powerful of all, though it had never appeared during war at the end of the Dark Age. Any faction that could get such a sky castle would undeniably become the top faction in Amril immediately. Of course, the legendary masters could only think about getting it. If it was really the 7th sky castle, it would be sought after by every faction, and even Sanctuary Realm powerhouses wouldn't give it up. By then, any Sanctuary powerhouse would have wiped out their factions, given that they had merely reached Legendary Realm. Seeing the expressions of the legendary masters, Lin Li couldn't help feeling it funny. Even Lin Li didn't know which crack between time and space the 7th sky castle had drifted into, let alone these people. He shook his head slightly, and said, "You'll probably be disappointed. I'm saying that this map is very likely the design blueprint of the 7th sky castle. However, it's probably impossible to find the 7th sky castle in the ruins." This, the legendary masters didn't know whether to laugh or to cry. Though they didn't think they had the ability to get the sky castle, this lad was still too annoying. If there weren't any sky castles in the ruins, why would he even mention it? Master Felix, do you have any proof of what you've just said? Though Cheyenne had asked the question, the other three in the room were also waiting for Lin Li's answer. Not to mention, if it was really the seventh sky castle, how was Lin Li so sure that it was a map of a sky castle? 6 sky castles were destroyed at the end of the Dark Age. Other than the several sanctuary powerhouses who had been through that era, few people nowadays knew how a sky castle really looked like. How could a 20-year-old mage who had just reached legendary realm like Lin Li know about it when the other legendary masters all didn't know? I believe Hutton and Stephen have told you about what happened in the Blackstone Mountains. The 3 relics of Juresco weren't a secret to any of you here: the Book of Eternity, a magical crystal, and the key to the 7th sky castle, said Lin Li honestly. Speaking of the 3 relics of Juresco, Cheyenne and Borg looked a little embarrassed. After all, they had the right to inherit these relics, but their incapable children had let such a great opportunity slip away. However, after a brief moment of embarrassment, they realized that Lin Li mentioned the 3rd relic was the key to the 7th sky castle. Lin Li didn't have to explain too much after this. Since he had the sky castle's key, he would naturally understand more about it, and it wasn't strange for him to recognize the map. This also revealed another piece of information: Juresco had obviously owned this sky castle before. If not, how would he have the key to it? This was precisely the reason that this most powerful sky castle didn't appear during the war. Juresco had brought the 7th sky castle away, and the sky castle had stopped over at the ruins of the Titans before. This showed that Juresco had visited the ruins of the Titans already. The god of mages Juresco was as outstanding as the immortal king in terms of ability. High Lord Osric couldn't do anything to the ruins of the Titans, but it wasn't the case for Juresco. Thinking of all that, the legendary masters didn't look good. After all, nobody expected that so many secrets would be uncovered during the brief information exchange. Just the ruins of the Titans were related to the immortal king, Osric, and now Juresco. More importantly, since Juresco had visited the place already, what was there left for them? Don't worry, I have a feeling that we won't come back empty-handed this time. Lin Li obviously had such confidence since Thunderbolt was definitely there. He would get it no matter what happened. As for the Manhwa family and Dark Blade, they wouldn't come back empty-handed either. Though Juresco had overthrown the High Elf's rule, he wasn't a destroyer of civilizations. There was a reason that Thunderbolt was sealed in the Higa mountain range. Given the countless ferocious magical beasts in there, only the power of Thunderbolt could prevent the ruins from being destroyed by the beasts. Rather than saying that Thunderbolt was sealed in there, it was more likely that Juresco was using this piece of the debris of the stars to protect something. What feeling? The legendary masters weren't fools. They understood that Lin Li had hidden some information from them once he said this. However, everyone was holding something back. The Manhwa family held back Osric's diary, while the Dark Blade didn't know just that the Higa Mountains hid the ruins of the Titans. The 3 parties shared the information they had. Although all of them held something back, they had at least gained a rough understanding of the ruins of the Titans. All this information also showed the necessity of collaboration. Lin Li felt quite pleased with how it had all progressed. It had been the right move for him to share the treasure map with the Manhwa family earlier. Although it was a surprise that the Dark Blade had joined in, it was a pleasant surprise. After sharing the information with one another, 2 parties started to analyze and plan their teams, not 3, since Lin Li had only brought Norfeller along, unlike the other 2 factions which had mobilized almost all of their elites. There was nothing left to discuss after this. The Manhwa family and the Dark Blade were old enemies to begin with, so Cheyenne had no interest in remaining here, and left. Lin Li knew very well that he could only ally with Cheyenne in order to maintain an equilibrium between the 3 parties. Hence, he refused Borg's invitation, and left the tent with Cheyenne. Lin Li and Cheyenne left the Dark Blade's territory with Borg sending them off. Neither of them spoke, and they slowly walked towards the Manhwa family's camp. After they had walked very far from the Dark Blade's campsite, Cheyenne peered at Lin Li, and saw that his expression was still calm. He then felt a little relieved. After all, it was the Manhwa family's fault for leaking out the treasure map. Moreover, he mentioned the adventure diary just now. If it had been any other youth, he would have been rather displeased with all that. Cheyenne didn't feel guilty, though. After all, the so-called alliance was just two parties with similar interests. Without common interests as the linkage, there wouldn't be any alliance at all. As long as there was common interest, even the two old enemies, the Manhwa family and the Dark Blade, could stand together, let alone someone you concealed things from. Comment. Master Felix, what do you think about the ruins of the Titans that Borg talked about? Cheyenne didn't mention the information he had, but rather talked about Borg's information. Other than asking about Lin Li's opinion, he more importantly wanted to test Lin Li's attitude toward the alliance. In Cheyenne's eyes, the young legendary mage was still just a youth who was just 20 years old. The Darkness Shrine is one of the oldest factions now, so it's normal for them to find that information. I believe they know more than what they have told us. With tacit understanding, Lin Li didn't mention the fact that Cheyenne had hidden Osric's adventure diary from him, and confirmed the Dark Blade's source of information. To outsiders, the Darkness Shrine had only been established at the end of the Dark Age, although it had a long history. However, Lin Li knew from Sendros that the Darkness Shrine came from the ancient Eternal Shrine. Hence, Lin Li didn't doubt the accuracy of the Dark Blade's information, and was certain that they knew more than this. Cheyenne looked solemn and agreed with Lin Li. He didn't feel at all good that matters weren't under his control anymore. After a moment of contemplation, he said, "The Dark Blade is determined to get the ruins of the Titans, judging from all the elites they have gathered for the expedition. What they have hidden is certainly not that simple." The ruins of the Titans had been through the hands of the immortal king and Juresco before. What the Dark Blade knows is also not all to it. If they want to suppress us with this, they are thinking too simply. Lin Li wasn't arrogant. Otherwise, he wouldn't emphasize his alliance with Cheyenne. Besides eliminating Cheyenne's doubts about the information, Lin Li also had his reason for appearing to be so confident. Upon hearing Lin Li say us again, Cheyenne felt much more at ease. He knew that this young legendary mage certainly had some killer information judging from his confidence, although he didn't say it specifically. While Lin Li and Cheyenne had gone back to the Manhwa family's camp, the three chiefs of the Dark Blade returned to the tent. According to the information they had just gotten, they needed to reassess their two collaborators, especially that young legendary mage. Actually, Borg and the other two legendary chiefs hadn't deemed Lin Li someone important back when they had invited him, and hadn't put him on an equal level as a collaborator. In their eyes, Lin Li was indeed a genius one could only find one in 1,000 years. After all, the only other legendary mage who had reached legendary realm at the age of 20+ was Juresco. However, personal abilities weren't so important in the exploration of the ruins of the Titans. They even hadn't expected to hear anything useful from this young legendary mage. Yet, the moment Lin Li spoke about the Seventh Sky Castle, Borg and the others could not help but look at this young legendary mage differently. It was their first time treating him as an equal. This fella is really sly. Come to think of it, he had never said anything useful. That was Baldella. He scratched the puff of golden hair on top of his head as he tried to recall the information he heard Lin Li say earlier. That was when he realized that the young legendary mage was only saying that there were still things in the ancient ruins. On the other hand, the legendary bandit Lansdale was still as calm as ever. So what? As long as the ruins are not empty, it would depend on our ability, said Lansdale unaffectedly. I didn't expect Cheyenne to find Osric's notes about his adventures. It would really help us in the future. I believe that he would not risk the life of his descendants. Borg was very satisfied with the discussion among the three parties. Osric's notes, in particular, interested him the most. That was the item that would minimize his losses. Furthermore, he believed that Cheyenne did not have any tricks up his sleeves. After all, there were a lot of disciples from Manhwa family in his adventurer team. Do you think the sky castle that fellow was talking about would still be in the ruins? I know that sky castles are able to enter the void. Hence, there might be a chance for the sky castle to be hidden there, no? Baldella made a casual guess. Even if there is, do you think he would do anything about the sky castle at such a time? But, I am certain that he is aware of the treasure hidden there. Borg sighed. He thought about his useless son. If not for his son's lack of capability, Jaresko's relics would have been in his hands now. The key to the sky castle could be an important clue to the sky castle. No one would reject the ability to take control over a sky castle. That was a great temptation even to legendary powerhouses. It is fine if he decides to keep that a secret. He would never know what we have with us. He is not the one who can determine who should have the treasure. He could not help but worry for his incompetent son whenever he had to work with the other two men. How could the father not know his son's personality? Borg knew that this son did not tell him everything that had happened in the Blackstone Mountains. After returning to his tent, he called for Stephen immediately. He needed to know his opponent better. Stephen arrived very quickly. He was still indignant after his father's order to apologize to Felix. Although he did not dare to oppose his father directly, he could not help but feel resentful. To be honest, Stephen was extremely confident that he would be able to let Lin Li pay for the embarrassment he'd experienced in the Blackstone Mountains immediately. Having the three legendary powerhouses and the numerous elites with the dark blade, Stephen was deeply convinced that Cheyenne from the Malfa family would have to bow his head low to him. How could that be comparable to the darn Felix who had just entered the legendary realm? Despite hearing the recent news of him defeating a level 22 elven legendary mage in Roland City, Stephen was still certain that Felix would not be able to challenge the present dark blade. Stephen absolutely had not expected his father's order for him to apologize to Felix. He was like a child who'd eagerly anticipated a candy, but received a tight slap instead. The difference was stark. It would only be normal for him to cry and whine on the ground. How could Borg not understand Stephen's thoughts? Borg laughed at the sight of his son's expression. What, are you still angry with me? Nope. Hee. Borg laughed gently at his son's stubbornness. A fool would have recognized Stephen's indignant tone. Borg did not treat Stephen like how he usually treated others. Instead of smacking the table angrily, Borg would prefer to educate his son gently. After all, Stephen was one of the best magic talents in the Breezy Plains, having the ability above level 18 despite being in his 20s. His craft had improved drastically after his trip to the Blackstone Mountains as well. Borg was confident that his son would reach the legendary realm within 2 years. How could Borg bear to punish or scold such a son? If there had to be something that Borg was unsatisfied with, it would be Stephen's young age and the strong protectiveness he had been getting from the three legendary powerhouses. Borg believed that it had to be Stephen's lack of experience that had caused him to take things for granted and be so self-centered. It was the same this time. Hey, you really have too little experience. How could you not know that a slight loss would never matter to people like us? So what if you apologize? Look, who knows if he'd be apologizing to you tomorrow? But, father, Stephen felt secretly relieved when he realized that his father had no intention of reprimanding him. After slight hesitation, he said, the Dark Blade had already acquired enough clues regarding the Immortal King's treasures. I am confident that the family alone would have 50% chance of locating them ourselves. Why should we share everything with the Malfa family and Felix? You think that this is called sharing? Borg paused, and suddenly laughed. Hee, why don't you see it like an exploitation? Exploitation? Borg did not elaborate further. Stephen, who do you think is more powerful, the Dark Blade or Malfa family? Asked Borg abruptly. It's the Dark Blade, of course. Look at who is in our team. I am certain that we would only take half a day to wipe out the whole Malfa family if we were to have a battle here. Then, who do you think is stronger, me and your two uncles, or Cheyenne and that Felix? Isn't the answer obvious? It has to be you and my two uncles. Cheyenne has just reached level 21, and Felix is definitely nothing. I saw him reach level 20 in the breezy plains with my very own eyes. I am sure that he would never be able to reach level 21 no matter how talented he is, or how much effort he put in. I bet the recent rumors about him defeating a level 22 elven mage are fake. If not, it had to be Felix playing tricks behind the scenes. So, you are saying that the Dark Blade has to be the strongest force? Of course. Then what are you worrying about? We have absolute power in our hands. Why would it matter if we were to join forces with them? Even if we were to find immortal king's treasures, the power to allocate them ultimately lies with us. Furthermore, it is time to put an end to the conflict between the Dark Blade and the Manhwa family. Stephen gasped. Why you mean? We can use this chance to get rid of Cheyenne? It could be said that the Manhwa family and the Dark Blade were one of the most infamous pairs of enemies in the breezy plains. Although the conflict had been around for only a century, they suffered great losses from every battle they had fought. Having invested greatly into each of those battles, they had already become a significant burden to each other. If they did not shrug each other off, they would never rise to be as powerful as the almighty Glitter Gold Trade Union. However, neither the Manhwa family nor the Dark Blade got to get rid of each other in the last century. For the Manhwa family, their weakness was a lack of power. Just in terms of legendary powerhouses alone, the Manhwa family only had one to deal with the three in the Dark Blade. It would not be easy for the one legendary mage to protect himself. How could the Manhwa family even uproot the Dark Blade? At the same time, the Dark Blade was geographically at disadvantage in Aminya. While they had been invading Aminya countless times, they had never been a real treat to the Manhwa family. Although the Dark Blade had had plans to assassinate Cheyenne, the sly Cheyenne had never given the three legendary powerhouses from the Dark Blade a chance to confront him. This explained why the Dark Blade could never shrug off the burdensome Manhwa family that only had one legendary mage. Yeah, I've been plotting with your two uncles for this opportunity since forever. We would be able to clear this mess in 10 minutes. That's awesome. Hence, Stephen, this is why I wanted you to apologize to that Felix. Our partnership does not only concern the immortal king's treasures, but also the development of the Dark Blade in the future decades and centuries. If we don't get rid of the Manhwa family, the Dark Blade will be trapped in Aminya forever, and would never flourish like the Glitter Gold Trade Union. In order to prevent any mishaps, we have to ensure that Felix remains neutral in the conflict between the two forces. A superficial neutrality would be good enough. But, Stephen spoke hesitantly. Then, he could not help but feel indignant again. But father, I don't think there is a need to do that. Is that so? Tell me your reasons. Just like what you said earlier, we have an absolute advantage when it comes to ability. As long as we have the chance, it is not difficult for you and the uncles to get rid of Cheyenne. You have reached level 21 a few decades ago, while Felix has only reached the realm recently. He has no right to interfere in your battle, explained Stephen. Furthermore, I think you might have forgotten what I had gotten from the Lord of Souls in the Abyss of Tharlan, Stephen added on softly, as if with the determination to convince Borg. You mean, Borg replied restlessly. A gleam appeared out of all his wrinkles. That's right, father. The Lord of Souls has died. I can feel that each of his soul fragments has vanished from this world. But, the force he left in my body, Stephen's voice became soft and hoarse, like that of a man who had just got drunk. But the force it left in my body is boiling. As long as I'm given enough time to assimilate them, I will become the fourth legendary powerhouse of the Dark Blade. Before Stephen could finish speaking, Borg sprang from his seat. He grabbed Stephen's shoulders and sent a wave of mana into his body. As time trickled by, his astonishment turned into relief and joy. It's true. Really? This is great. Really great. As an experienced legendary powerhouse who had reached level 21 a few decades ago, how could he not be able to sense that his son was indeed close to the boundaries of the legendary realm, and had a strong wave of force within him? This force was constantly assimilating into his body like an ice mountain in a lake. Initially, it had been a lofty structure that stood unrelated to the lake. However, as time passed, the ice mountain melted. Stephen would reach the legendary realm once the ice mountain turned into part of the lake. If everything goes well, I have the confidence to finish assimilating the spiritual force of the Lord of Souls. When that time comes, we'll have no need for his neutral stance. Yeah. Borg nodded, and did not continue the conversation. He was caught up in his thoughts. Oh, yes. Stephen. I have never gotten to ask you about your experience in the abyss, Borg remarked abruptly after a period of 10 minutes. After we entered the abyss, we met a group of winged demons. According to that Felix, they were the Aztecs, replied Stephen slowly as he tried to recall his time in the abyss. What? You were saying that a group of Aztecs launched the live bombs together? How did you manage to stay alive? The level 21 legendary mage gasped. Stephen had never mentioned his experience in the abyss after his return. Despite being his father, it was the first time Borg heard about his son's experience. Borg did not expect himself to be unable to contain his subsequent expressions of shock. 3 rainbow manticore kings? Did they share the same soul like the legends claimed? Do you still remember what spell Felix cast? How could he use one streak of light to counter the dark decay? The dark decay is a spell with a standard that is the closest to the magical domain. According to your account, wasn't Felix a level 19 mage at the point of time? Could it be that he had some magical equipment that allowed him to use a magical domain? This is outrageous. Are you saying that the magical domain Felix cast was not only a snowy sky, but also strange creatures with black and white wings? Were they summoned by the laws of light and darkness? Borg's easiness from earlier had vanished. He turned paler with each experience Stephen shared with him. There was no sign of redness on his countenance. Borg was not Stephen. As a level 21 legendary mage, his knowledge and experience were not something a young man like Stephen could match up to. Although the account of the story was filled with Stephen's biased conjectures, as well as silly and egoistic remarks, Borg managed to piece these fragments together, which brought him closer to the truth. Borg would have known the implications of live bombs launched by a dozen Aztecs. It would even be more impossible that he would be unaware of how scary the Rainbow Manticore Kings were for their ability to share the same soul, as for what it meant for a man to have the power to cast spells from the 3 types of magical domains. A child would have a clear understanding of it as well. After hearing about Stephen's encounters, Borg could not help but admit Felix's potential to be beyond imagination. There was a high possibility for the news of the battle in Roland City to be true. Felix really defeated a level 22 elven mage. In the end, that Felix got his hands on all of Juresco's relics, and I have gotten the strength from the Lord of Souls. But, I'm really curious whether the acquisition of Juresco's relics would mean that he has already acquired the method to reach the sanctuary realm, Stephen remarked reflectively. He was immersed in the force of the Lord of Souls assimilating into him. That's enough, Stephen. His father snapped. Remember what I tell you. No matter how reluctant you were to apologize to Felix, we need him to maintain a neutral stance. I forbid you from provoking him before we get our hands on Immortal King's treasures. This is an order. But, father. Stephen retorted. He had not expected that his proud and voluminous speech would not change his father's decision. Despite knowing that he was about to reach the legendary realm, his father was still insisting that he refrain from provoking that Felix. Why did he have to be cautious about another legendary mage? Unfortunately, Borg gave Stephen no chance of rebutting. After reminding him with a very grave and serious expression, he dismissed Stephen from his tent. After making some adjustments to their team, the 2 adventuring teams gathered the very next day. A stronger troop advanced towards the Higa mountain range. Of course, to prevent any unnecessary conflicts, the 2 teams were still in their respective clusters. Cheyenne referred to Osric's notes as he led these 2 teams to avoid some troublesome regions. Although the journey was a little tedious, it did not hinder their speed. The day went by very smoothly. Although they frequently encountered magical beasts above level 10, the hundreds of powerhouses above level 15 managed to go unhindered by them. However, Osric's adventure diary was not all-encompassing. It would be too ideal to hope for a smooth sailing path in the Higa mountain range. Despite making the effort to avoid possible legendary beasts, the team was obstructed by a group of powerful magical beasts. The adventurers had grown complacent due to the smooth sailing journey earlier on. However, the elites above level 15 grew alert as they saw numerous magical beasts flying out of the forest. The mages in the team cast defensive spells on themselves and their teammates. It was as though the entire team were protected under the shield. The numerous spells erupted above them. Despite their timely defense, the sudden attack launched by the beasts resulted in a few injuries. The team stopped in their tracks. No one cared to admire the magnificent fireworks blasting on top of their heads. There were specialists who attended to the injured men, while the others stood on standby to deal with the magical beasts. The magical beasts, which launched the sneak attack, did not let the men wait for a very long time. Heart-wrenching howls echoed through the forest as the beasts left their hiding place and confronted the team directly. It was unlike their previous encounters. There were at least 40 beasts, and none of them were below level 18. Although there were close to 400 men who were all above level 15, and some at level 18, it did not mean that they would have an advantage over the group of powerful beasts. Compared to the innately intrepid magical beasts, humans would be at a disadvantage. If you're enjoying my content, please consider donating a coffee. Or checking out my shirts on TeePublic. Hence, even if the team of adventurers could gain the upper hand, their capability was still very limited. It would be impossible for them to destroy the bunch of magical beasts without paying a huge price. The price would be bloodshed and their lives. That was something the legendary leaders did not wish to see happen. The leaders brought subordinates to the Higa mountain range to get them to help, and not to make them sacrifice their lives. They were all their elites, and none of them wished for there to be major losses. Hence, at this point, the several legendary leaders could no longer stay idle. They had to hurry up and tackle the magical beasts based on the energy fluctuations before the beasts caused any lethal damage. They quickly left the team and stepped forth. They were not worried about the effects that would be brought upon their team if they were unable to give orders. In fact, they'd already become spiritual symbols in their respective forces at this point. Hence, they would rarely waste their energy on miscellaneous issues which would be left to the professionals to handle. The action taken by the legendary leaders caused a huge fanfare amongst the crowd. Even if they already possessed power that was beyond level 15, the legendary leaders were still godly to them. The pressure brought by the 40-odd magical beasts no longer seemed so oppressive and suffocating, because the subordinates knew that their legendary leaders were definitely able to solve all problems at hand. Hence, all they had to do now was to perform their obligations and duties. At the same time, a fierce and menacing magical beast had already invaded the team, and the initially close-knit adventurer team seemed to have dissipated like a bubble that burst upon being touched. However, they were not really disintegrating, but were merely dispersing and regrouping into smaller teams to attack the magical beasts. After all, they were adventurers who were much more used to using this method rather than the formations of military to defend against the enemy. A warrior who held a strong shield bashed a magical beast with it in order to get its attention. The supporting magic also gave the warrior a multicolored halo. An agile swordsman walked around the magical beast flexibly, and stabbed it with his sharp sword, causing it to bleed severely from its wound. A bandit suddenly appeared behind the magical beast, and then pierced it with a poisonous dagger, and the deadly toxin quickly penetrated into its body. A level 18 magical beast was absolutely terrifying, and the differences in level could not be compensated for or negated by numerical advantage most of the time. After all, there were only a few people who could really attack a magical beast. The level 18 magical beasts often had strong bodies, immeasurable power, and formidable capacity for magic. Hence, it would usually be impossible for an army of people to battle and destroy a level 18 magical beast. Everyone knew that two level 15 combatants wouldn't make a level 16 one. Hence, everyone decided to cooperate and place more emphasis on devising tactics using their brains. They wanted to achieve the effects of increasing their power through meticulous cooperation and teamwork. Since the day when human beings were created, humans knew that they were inherently weak, and that they had to cooperate with each other in order to survive. The various processes of life, be it during the hunting of prey or protecting themselves from foreign enemies, were opportunities for humans to continue honing their cooperative skills. However, it still required a large amount of time for humans to develop seamless cooperation, even if they had the teachings and battle tactics that had been passed down from their forefathers. They had to train and improve through countless battles and fights. More importantly, they had to trust their allies and comrades unconditionally, and be assured that they would have each other's back. Although the strong were still at the top of the hierarchy in today's world, people usually worshipped individuals who were stronger, and were more focused on personal strength. Many idolized Juresco and aspired to be like him. However, they had all forgotten that even Juresco, who was known as the god of mages, needed the help of his comrades during the war to overthrow the rule of the High Elves. Unconditional trust in one's comrades seemed to be a far-fetched idea in a pragmatic world where interests and profits came first. No one dared to guarantee that they wouldn't be stabbed in the back by their comrade after giving them their complete trust. Interests could come in many forms, be it treasures, magical crystals, or gold coins. If there was no trust among comrades, it would be impossible to achieve victory regardless of how superb their battle tactics might be. The so-called tacit understanding was actually established on the basis of trust. Without trust, nothing would work. That was particularly evident in the Manhwa family's team of adventurers. Although the Manhwa family mobilized more than 60 mages who belonged to their own family, the 100-odd adventurers were all recruited recently. These adventurers might not have known each other before, or perhaps only heard of each other's names. However, they were definitely experienced adventurers since they could advance to level 15 and above. They were all familiar with various coordination tactics, but because of the lack of trust amongst them, they could not work with each other at all. The Dark Blade was undoubtedly the strongest team amongst all. It was a fact that even Cheyenne could not deny. It wasn't just because they had a larger number of people, but because they could really trust each other, and had built a tacit understanding which allowed them to maximize their strength. The Dark Blade did not seem to hesitate at all, despite being faced with the crazy attack of the magical beasts. They quickly divided into smaller teams, each composed of a fixed number of people. Among them, there were various occupational combinations which would besiege a magical beast. That was the classic method of hunting and killing magical beasts. Actually, it was understandable. The old den of the Dark Blade was in the periphery of the Haiga mountain range. Although hunting for magical beasts had not been an important source of income for the Dark Blade, it had already become a tradition over the years. The elites had plenty of actual combat experience too. Each small team worked for many years to develop the seamless teamwork and trust they now had. The battle going on in the battlefield was extremely intense, with the sounds of explosions, the roars of magical beasts, and the hollering of warriors everywhere. In fact, it was just as intense as a war between two countries. However, the battles of the legendary masters going on not too far away from them were much more peaceful compared to this. Although they were all facing 2 or 3 menacing magical beasts each, they could still cope with them effortlessly. However, Lin Li, who was also a legendary figure, showed no intention to attack. He stood on top of a huge tree, and watched the battle that was going on in the battlefield, which was full of the various teams. He seemed to be searching for a target, but did not look like he was going to make a move. The vampire Norfeller was right next to him. Although he was holding on to his dagger that was placed near his waist, he dared not do anything without Lin Li's permission. "It's almost time. You may go," Lin Li, who scanned the battlefield for a long time, said to Norfeller calmly, without even turning around. Norfeller bent forward slightly, and immediately darted towards the battlefield. Although he was an undead creature, Norfeller's advancement was extremely slow, just like for other vampires. However, his abilities increased rapidly, and he was in fact already physically at level 19 even though he had yet to reach the legendary level. On the battlefield, the Dark Blade's small team was in the midst of surrounding a magical beast which was covered in blood. It no longer looked as menacing as it had been when it first appeared, even though it still had a crazy look in its eyes. However, as it had lost an excessive amount of blood, and the toxins began to affect it, its movements became extremely restricted. When a swordsman of the Dark Blade was about to stab the chest of the magical beast, a dark shadow bolted into the team like lightning. He then heard the magical beast roaring loudly, before growing silent again. When the magical beast roared, everyone thought that the dark shadow was there to help them, although they were already almost going to defeat the magical beast. However, they still had to acknowledge the good intentions. When the magical beast's corpse appeared in front of them, they were immediately infuriated. There was a huge hole that was pierced through the magical beast's body, and the magical crystal that was supposed to be inside it had already gone missing. Clearly, the dark shadow was there to take advantage of them. Lin Li was still standing on top of the tree, feeling pleased with Norfeller's actions. It was no wonder that Norfeller was his sworn servant, for he could totally read Lin Li's mind. Borg was not too far away from the battlefield, and was currently fighting 2 griffins. Although the magical domains of the legendary mages were formidable, it was not easy to maneuver them. In order to ensure that he had enough mental strength to deal with the possible changes after arriving in the ruins of Titans, he had no choice but to use these 2 conventional ways to teach the 2 griffins a lesson. Although the griffins in the Royal Knight's army were domesticated, they were still difficult to deal with. Compared to wild griffins, though, the domesticated ones were like tigers without teeth, and could only be used to scare timid enemies. The wild level 18 griffins were much more difficult to deal with than other griffins of the same level. Borg had been carefully observing Lin Li's actions in a bid to see if the young legendary mage was as formidable as the rumors made him to be. However, he almost fell from the sky after witnessing that sight, and he cursed in his head furiously. Damn it, this Felix is really as shameless as he's rumored to be. Forget it if you sat back and did nothing while everyone else was fighting their guts out, yet you actually took advantage in the end? At the end of the day, you're still a fellow legendary realm powerhouse. Could you behave like one? Remember that they have that blood oath thingy going on. At this moment, Lin Li suddenly raised his head and looked up at the sky, only to sense a strong aura rushing towards the battlefield. In the blink of an eye, a small black spot in the distance quickly enlarged, and a menacing face appeared in front of him. The figure had a cat-like face and wings that spanned more than 10 meters. It was covered in black feathers with metallic luster, and had a pair of paws with sharp claws that were like sickles. Electrical arcs coiled around its body, producing snapping sounds. Lin Li had arrived in this world for a long time, and he could immediately tell that it was a thunder-valiant beast which definitely possessed level 19 powers. It was said that such beasts loved bathing in lightning, and could also transform their energy into their own. The people of Amril found lightning to be extremely powerful, and they saw it as a punishment of the gods, yet thunder-valiant beast could soak in it and absorb the power of the gods. It was no longer a matter of strength. Hence, in many ancient tribes, thunder-valiant beast was termed as a divine bird and the pet of heavens. Of course, the mages were not that afraid of or respectful towards the gods, because the magic that they had developed and studied was already touching the divine realm. However, they did respect the power of the gods, and firmly believed that they could reach the same level, or perhaps even surpass them. In the eyes of religious followers, they were disrespecting the gods and showing their contempt. However, it was just an expression of their respect. The so-called heavenly birds like thunder-valiant beast were nothing more than magical beasts that manipulated lightning. Thunderbolts came from the sky, hence, people tended to associate them with the gods. Although Lin Li had transmigrated to Amril, he still knew that gods did exist in this world, though there was a huge difference between such a god and those that were omnipresent and omnipotent. Thunder-valiant beast was level 19, and had the most powerful lightning force. Since the 4 other legendary masters could barely cope with it, Lin Li knew that he had to do something. Most importantly, it wasn't appropriate for him to vie with the 4 other legendary masters for the magical crystals while they were fighting off the magical beasts. Norfeller did not have that power either. If someone were to nab the Thunder Valiant beast, wouldn't he be unable to get the level 19 magical crystal? On the battlefield under the tree, Norfeller resolutely carried out Lin Li's instructions. He only launched a lethal attack when the magical beast was almost destroyed, killing it with a single shot, and taking the magic crystal away. Lin Li was very satisfied with his subordinates' performance. They were all in cooperation anyway. The wealthy and established Manhwa family and Dark Blade wouldn't care about these magical crystals, would they? Lin Li looked up at Thunder Valiant beast that was in the sky, slowly levitated upwards, whipped out the Helios scepter, and flew towards Thunder Valiant. The appearance of the Thunder Valiant beast had long caught everyone's attention, and plenty of people knew how powerful it was. The people surrounding level 18 magical beasts were already finding it tough to manage, killing them. If the Thunder Valiant beast were to join the fight, it would only make matters worse, and the magical beasts would have a strong member added to their force. The dynamics of the battle would probably change immediately, and casualties would be inevitable. However, everyone felt relieved when Lin Li launched his attack. Regardless of how young he might be, he was still an actual legendary mage. Even if he couldn't get rid of the Thunder Valiant beast immediately, he could at least buy some time until the masters returned. Compared with the other two legendary mages, Lin Li was much more domineering, and he managed to shield himself entirely with his magical domain with the wave of Helios scepter. He then charged towards the Thunder Valiant beast. He had an insane amount of mental strength to begin with, and on top of that, he had the Evil Eye Tyrant to give him additional strength at all times. The mental strength that he now possessed was beyond imaginable, and the release of an ice magical domain did not cost him much at all. Young man. Borg was rather relieved to see that Lin Li had launched his attack, but as soon as he saw Lin Li exhibiting his magical domain, he thought to himself, well, this young legendary mage is only 20 years old, after all. He still doesn't consider everything carefully before acting. But that's okay. I know he's in an alliance with Cheyenne, and the more he contributes, the weaker the alliance would be. That would be great for our Dark Blade too. Likewise, Cheyenne had also noticed the battle in the sky. He shared the same thoughts as Borg, but he was much more worried and full of complaints. He didn't think there was anything wrong with Lin Li refusing to launch an attack, because he felt that the Dark Blade ought to waste more of their resources and contribute more since they were stronger. However, they'd now lost another portion of power because Lin Li had resorted to using his magical domain before even finding the balance. The Thunder Valiant beast was actually almost in the legendary realm, and had an extraordinary amount of lightning power. Hence, the magic it exhibited slightly resembled a prototype of the magical domain. Seemingly having sensed the magical waves that came from Lin Li, the Thunder Valiant beast shrieked loudly before flapping its wings vigorously and starting to rampage. Although Lin Li had already decided to launch an attack, he wouldn't use up everything he had against the Thunder Valiant beast. Hence, he had merely exhibited his frost domain, which was the most common amongst legendary mages. He made himself the center of it, and there seemed to be dark fumes of ink above his head which soon formed a huge vortex in the middle, which looked like it was a gateway to another world. Compared to a real magical domain, the Thunder Valiant beast's magic seemed to be a bit inadequate, for it was immediately suppressed and undermined by Lin Li's frost domain. Originally, it seemed that the two powers were the same, but after the two domains clashed, the area of Thunder Valiant beast's lightning bolts seemed to have decreased significantly. Thunder Valiant beast howled and grunted in exertion, which resembled the daunting sounds of necromagic. However, this interference had no effect on Lin Li at all, and the repression by frost domain continued to increase. There seemed to be a ray of light in the center of the huge vortex in the dark clouds over his head. A frost bird that was of the same size as the Thunder Valiant beast pounced onto the latter, followed by a few other frost birds. Those who were forced to end the battle on the battlefield could no longer be bothered to worry about the magical crystals being snatched away, and were all looking up at the magical battle that was going on in the sky. Those of the other professions were just watching for the sake of thrill and excitement, but the mages were feeling bitter. The legendary mage in the sky was only 20 years old. How enviable. After all, There were 4 other legendary mages in the team of adventurers apart from Lin Li. Although the level 18 magical beasts were strong and tyrannical, they did not let the battle go on for long. Once the 4 legendary masters freed up their hands to launch their attacks, the battle would be ended faster. It was precisely because of this that both parties would get the chance to grab some magical crystals. Otherwise, they might never get a single piece of magical crystal at the rate that Norfeller was going. A bullet from the dragon gun shuttled through the frost birds and hit the Thunder Valiant beast right in its heart. A level 19 magical crystal then darted out of the dead Thunder Valiant beast and landed in Lin Li's hand. Lin Li did not let its body go to waste either, and kept it in Ring of Endless Storm, leaving behind just a few fluttering feathers. Lin Li was just being kind and giving others some of the remnants. Otherwise, they might not even get their hands on the bodies of the magical beasts if Norfeller took those too. No one dared to complain, and they had no choice but to comfort themselves by telling themselves that it wasn't too bad to share the corpses of the magical beasts, even though the magical crystals were the most valuable. Lin Li descended and wiped the sweat off of his head ostensibly. He heaved a long sigh and complained to Cheyenne and others, "Dear masters, aren't we allies? Why didn't you give me a hand? This fellow has really made me waste so much energy." Despite finding Lin Li to be shameless deep down, Borg remained smiling, and said, "Hee, it's been hard on you, Master Felix. We've decided to get some rest here today. We'll continue with the journey tomorrow." Lin Li didn't have any opinion to express. Anyway, there were only 2 people on his side, and it didn't matter what the arrangement was. He scanned his surroundings to see that everyone else was getting busy, some taking care of the injured, while others were dissecting the bodies of the magical beasts. Although the team was very strong, it would be impossible for there to be no injured or casualties. Lin Li had already deduced that the corpses of the magical beasts were of no value. However, at this moment, he suddenly thought of another problem. There was nothing too surprising about encountering wolves and magical beasts in the forest. However, the corpses on the ground seemed to be of the same species. Not only were the 40-odd level 18 magical beasts not beasts that lived in groups, they were also from the same species, thus making it rather strange. Since the magical beasts were all above level 18, they all ought to have their own respective territories. They were naturally hostile towards each other, and would immediately get into a fight in the past. However, they actually united and launched an attack on the adventurer team. There was only one explanation for it, and that was that some force had driven them to carry out this attack. The magical beast which was of the highest level and strength was undoubtedly the Thunder Valiant beast that Lin Li had just killed. However, the problem was that it was too much of an exaggeration for it to defeat 40-odd level 18 magical beasts even if it were level 19. When Lin Li trapped the Thunder Valiant beast in his frost domain, he did not detect any signals from the outside world. Hence, the leader was definitely incompetent. Or perhaps there could be another force manipulating the magical beasts behind this facade? On that night, the team set up camps to rest. There were drops in manpower in both their teams. 6 of the Manhwa family's adventurers met with difficulties, but only 2 members of Dark Blade had been hurt. The latter had better teamwork and experience. Lin Li hid in his tent and researched the debris of the stars using the excuse of being tired. He carefully tried to capture the imaginary connection in space, using the 3 pieces of the debris of the stars that he had. After a quiet night, the team continued their journey early the next morning. They were obviously much more careful than before. The experience that they had the previous day made them realize the hardships of this trip. The Haiga mountain range could not be traversed by ordinary people. If it weren't because of Cheyenne from the Manhwa family, who had Osric's adventure journal, they might not have been able to reach their destination, either. However, the more afraid of something someone was, the more likely it was that it would happen. Osric's adventure journal had once again been proven not to be omnipotent. The team was making rapid progress, but when evening arrived, they suddenly encountered a bunch of formidable beasts which emerged out of nowhere. No one knew where they came from, and there was even a legendary magical beast amongst the level 18 magical beasts. The magical beasts were dauntless, and they even went through mutations during the battle. They were crazy like religious fanatics ready to kamikaze their enemies. The members of the adventurers team were painstakingly suppressing their momentum and making their own movements more fluid and agile in hopes of sending the beasts in front of them to hell as soon as possible. The legendary masters did not have it easy either, although they were preserving their energy and power for the sake of the impending battle in the ruins of Titans later. Even Lin Li could not sit back and do nothing this time. Although he didn't put in too much energy, he was still a legendary mage at the end of the day. The level 19 Norfeller could give them some support and reduce their pressure too. The intense battle went on from evening all the way into the middle of the night. Both the Manhwa family and Dark Blade were hurt to different extents. However, their morale was not affected, because they all felt that the circumstances were developing in their advantage. At this moment, Lin Li happened to stop, thus causing the progress to slow down again. However, it did not change the favorable conditions of the adventurer team. Without attracting anyone's attention, Lin Li quietly left the lively battlefield, and followed a whiff of air as he embarked on a search. Before returning to the camp to get some rest, Lin Li found the aura that came from Thunderbolt, using the 3 pieces of the debris of the stars. That feeling seemed to get clearer and clearer as he approached, all the way until he reached an obscure valley. Lin Li didn't attract anyone's attention. He followed the subtle aura, moving quickly in the night. He could no longer hear the sounds of people roaring and the intense explosions. At this moment, he was in the valley. He had no idea if that was where the so-called Titans had been. The valley was very wide and surrounded by dense trees and thick leaves. The scenery in the valley was completely different from that outside. However, it seemed darker and dimmer because of the steep cliffs on both sides which blocked out some of the moonlight. The pitch-black darkness did not have much effect on Lin Li, who could find his destination as long as he could still detect the things around him. The wind passed through the valley, causing the leaves to rustle, while little fireflies fluttered aimlessly in the forest. If it weren't for Thunderbolt, Lin Li would have stopped in his tracks and admired the forest during this quiet night. Unfortunately, he didn't have that much time to waste. The battle outside the valley was in full swing, and he couldn't waste such a rare opportunity. Lin Li did not find his sudden escape embarrassing. Out of the 3 partner sides in the cooperation, he was the weakest and least privileged one. Although he worked with the Manhwa family to deal with the Dark Blade, he was still weaker than the Manhwa family. Hence, in order to make some gains during this operation, he had to find the source of detection one before the Manhwa family and the Dark Blade did. He continued to walk along the valley, but he suddenly stopped in his tracks after walking a short distance. He kept his guard up, and soon saw a black figure leaping out of the darkness and pouncing on him. A level 16 shadow leopard no longer posed a threat to Lin Li, who was already a legendary mage. Shadow leopards were a type of magical beasts which could conceal themselves fully in the dark. They would catch their prey off guard and kill them, like the assassins of magical beasts. However, they were incredibly talented in magic, though they were not that outstanding amongst magical beasts. A single failure would mean that they no longer had the advantage. Even experienced adventurers who were above level 15 wouldn't allow Shadow Leopard to attack them successfully, let alone Lin Li, a legendary mage. Lin Li took a small step backwards and waved the Helios scepter gently while murmuring a spell, after which an icy cold aura drifted towards the Shadow Leopard. In that instant, the Shadow Leopard was frozen with a layer of ice whilst suspended in midair, turning into a snow leopard. It was just a level 16 magical beast. If Lin Li couldn't even kill it with one move, it would seem too embarrassing. Without even taking another glance, he walked towards the stiff corpse of the Shadow Leopard, strode over it, and continued his journey. However, he didn't expect Shadow Leopard to be just an appetizer. Outside the valley, the Manhwa family and the Dark Blade's adventure team encountered the attack of many high-level magical beasts. When Lin Li finally left the battlefield, and followed the trail of detection further down the valley, he never encountered a magical beast, not even a level 1-1. However, it was different in this valley. Shadow Leopard was only the first one of the beasts that he encountered. The subsequent ones were not only stronger, they also appeared in larger groups. The journey in the valley was not as smooth as that outside. Almost all the high-level beasts seemed to have gathered there. What exactly happened? Or did something go wrong with my detection? Lin Li began to doubt himself more and more as he delved deeper. If it were like what they had guessed about it being the ruins of Titans, there definitely wouldn't be so many magical beasts. The ruins of Titans had been here for so many years, and there had to be a powerful method employed by Immortal King and Juresco to prevent the destruction caused by magical beasts. Apart from the wise high-level magical beasts, even those which only had basic reproductive abilities knew which places to go and which ones would be dangerous for them. Since the strong thunderbolt, which was one of the pieces of the debris of the stars, was sealed in this place, Lin Li believed that it definitely wasn't a playground for the magical beasts. Although Lin Li had legendary-level strength, he couldn't put it to use, because he didn't want to attract the attention of Cheyenne, Borg, and the rest. The speed of his progress was indeed affected, though he had not met with a truly difficult situation yet. A few high-level magical beasts were not too significant, but when a level 20 magical beast appeared, even Lin Li could not help but feel troubled. In Amril, anything related to magical beasts would definitely be extremely powerful, and the one in front of Lin Li now was undoubtedly a magical beast which carried the blood of dragons. It was a red-backed sickle-clawed dragon which had an armor full of dark brown scales. It was about 6 meters in height, and was rather short amongst the descendants of the WYRMS. Still, it definitely posed a huge threat to all adventurers. However, like most of the WYRMS relatives today, the WYRM's blood in red-backed dragons was already very diluted. However, even then, it still had strength that was close to level 20. Not only did its scales provide great defense, its genes gave it high magic resistance inherited from the blood of the WYRM, and its sickle-like claws could easily tear the armors worn by humans. They could also destroy the weapons of humans and tear the magical shields of mages. Lin Li needed to suppress his own strength, but the red-backed sickle-clawed dragon didn't. Its massive physical strength was enough to daunt any opponent. However, as a descendant of the WYRMS, how could brutal strength be the only thing it knew? Its short stature gave it an advantage of being able to move quickly, and its speed was even on par with the swiftness of the attacks of the shadow leopard. Of course, its short height was only relative to the many descendants of the dragons. Compared to humans, its 6-meter-tall frame definitely made it seem like a monster. The red-backed sickle-clawed dragon's attack was swift, and even had the effect of a wind blade. With a powerful strength that was almost level 20, it would be difficult for anyone to kill it, even sword sages. The high magic resistance brought by the blood of the WYRM, which also allowed one to move faster, seemed to have become insignificant for the dragons. It could be considered to be an expert in magic. If Lin Li were to use his magical domain, it would be a piece of cake for him to kill the red-backed sickle-clawed dragon, but once he started showing his power, he would probably attract Cheyenne's and Borg's attention. Both masters managed to enter the legendary realm based on their abilities, not luck. Hence, it would be difficult to hide anything from them. However, they would definitely be able to capture it even if it was just a momentary explosion of power. Although Lin Li was already far away from the battlefield, he would definitely be caught. Lin Li dared not take his 3 pieces of the debris of the stars out easily, because unlike his own power, he could not suppress the power of the debris of the stars for later use. Fortunately, the battle in the Harvest Square had given him the chance to win the Helios Scepter from Vidas. With this staff that had once shined in the Dark Age, the magic that he exhibited would be greatly enhanced in power. Even if he didn't use his legendary realm power, the strength of his magic would not be inferior to that of a legendary mage. The red-backed sickle-clawed dragon roared with a tinge of menace that was unique to dragons. However, it had no effect on the legendary mage Lin Li at all. The crimson dragon that Lin Li had encountered in the underground palace back then was much purer in terms of lineage than this. Before the red-backed sickle-clawed dragon approached, Lin Li had already finished chanting his spells, and he waved Helios Scepter gently in his hand. After that, Earth Magic Gravel was immediately released under the feet of the red-backed sickle-clawed dragon. Earth Magic had never been known for its offensive power, but the Earth Magic Gravel was definitely effective. A sharp stone spear emerged from the ground and stabbed the lower body and abdomen of the red-backed sickle-clawed dragon. Actually, this type of magic was great for dealing with humans too, though it was too embarrassing to be used against men, and too indecent to be used against women. Therefore, many mages had decided to forego it, especially since there were plenty of other spells they could use. There was no need to let themselves be despised for the sake of this spell. However, this type of magic was very effective for dealing with magical beasts. Well, everyone knew that the abdomens of magical beasts were often the softest and weakest part of their bodies. With the addition of the power of the Helios scepter, the stone spears seemed to glow like crystals and radiate light beneath the moon. The hardness of such crystal stone spears was not inferior to that of the real weapons used by warriors. Even though the red-backed sickle-clawed dragon had inherited the powerful defensive power of the dragon, it was still rather pathetic. Of course, the power of the red-backed sickle-clawed dragon was nonetheless close to level 20. It could not be destroyed merely by magic. The dragon sent its sickle-like claws slashing against the stone spears, and flattened them immediately. In just a split second, the massive spell struck the dragon and overwhelmed it. The process of the battle was not that thrilling. Although Lin Li could still deal with the dragon even without the Helios scepter, the scepter did allow him to save lots of energy. This was just a magical beast that was almost legendary. The only reward it would face for obstructing Lin Li was being sealed in the Ring of Endless Storm. Lin Li did not move on immediately after getting rid of the red-backed sickle-clawed dragon. Along the way, he had already placed more than a dozen high-level magical beasts in the Ring of Endless Storm, and after the red-backed sickle-clawed dragon appeared, Lin Li could not help but consider the potential obstacles that he might meet in the next half of his journey. What exactly happened in the valley, and the reason for the bizarre assembly of so many high-level magical beasts still remained a mystery that probably wouldn't be solved until Lin Li reached his destination. However, there was one thing that Lin Li could already be sure of, and that was that he would definitely encounter more magical beasts like the red-backed sickle-clawed dragon during the rest of his journey. He might even meet an actual legendary magical beast. If he were to bulldoze his way through, he might not reach his destination even after the Manhwa family and Dark Blade were done settling the battle outside. Lin Li was there to take advantage in advance, not to clear the obstacles for the Manhwa family and Dark Blade. Instead of exerting himself, he might as well leave it to them to deal with these obstructions. That would give him more time to respond and strategize after reaching his destination. Be it Thunderbolt, which was one of the pieces of the debris of the stars, or the mysterious object that was used to seal it, both treasures were irresistible temptation for anyone. Lin Li would not be so naive to believe that the Manhwa family and Dark Blade would remain cooperative with him and stay honest in the face of such a powerful artifact. Not to mention, Lin Li possessed 3 of Juresco's relics, which were no less valuable than the ruins of Titans. It could be said that he was a moving treasure in the eyes of others. God knew if they wouldn't find an excuse to kill Lin Li when it came to splitting the treasures if he were to consider morals and ethics now. After he gave it some thought, the frown on Lin Li's forehead eased, and he whipped out a potion from the Ring of Endless Storm. If there were a sensible person beside him, he or she would definitely gasp in shock because the potion bottle was made of crystal of eternity, and was a highly coveted treasure for all pharmacists. Potions placed in bottles made of the crystal of eternity enjoyed perfect preservation for eternity. Moreover, the longer the storage time, the stronger the properties of the potion in the crystal potion bottle. The potion definitely wasn't ordinary, since it was worthy of being placed in a potion bottle that was made of crystal of eternity. Placing low-level potions in bottles made of crystal of eternity would be a complete waste. As a pharmaceutics guru, Lin Li obviously wouldn't do that. The potion that he was holding onto was a master-level potion known as the stealth potion. Lin Li was not a bandit or an assassin, hence, he did not have any stealth skills. In order not to alarm the high-level magical beasts in the valley during his journey to the destination, he would have no choice but to rely on the potion. Lin Li believed that he would definitely encounter a stronger magical beast during the remaining part of his journey. Not to mention, the senses of these magical beasts were far greater than those of humans, and he probably would not be able to escape their heightened detection and instincts even if he were to have the stealth skills of legendary bandits. A potion like the stealth potion could command a price of more than 100,000 gold coins during an auction. However, he did not hesitate at all, because it was all for the sake of the debris of the stars. Instead, he twisted the cap of the potion bottle and emptied the light green contents into his mouth. The slightly bitter potion flowed down his throat and into his stomach, after which the gentle yet deep effects of the potion took effect instantly. Lin Li's body began to turn blurry at a speed that was visible to the naked eye until it completely integrated into the surrounding environment. The simple disappearance of the physical body would have no effect on those sensitive magical beasts, because most of them were blind in the first place, and only relied on their sense of smell and fluctuations in temperature and energy to detect and discern objects. However, the stealth potion that Lin Li had just ingested provided more than just the concealment of his physical body. Otherwise, it could not be considered a master-level potion. Apart from fully integrating the user's body shape into the environment, the stealth potion had a more powerful effect. It would hide all of the fluctuations of magic and combat energy within the body, as well as the breathing and heartbeat. After the potion took effect completely, Lin Li immediately rushed towards the deeper parts of the valley. No one knew how deep the valley truly was, and the effects of the stealth potion could only last for 10 minutes under the enhancement of the crystal potion bottle. Lin Li did not wish for the effects to fade completely when he ran into a large bunch of magical beasts, for that would be a huge blunder. The deeper he delved into the valley, the more frightened Lin Li got. At the same time, he also admired his foresight, which prompted him to prepare a master-level potion like the stealth potion. He even wondered if all of the high-end magical beasts in the Higa mountain range had been concentrated in this small valley. The adventurer team probably would not be experiencing anything too different from what they were now, with or without the adventuring notes provided by Cheyenne. Since the magical beasts had all been assembled in the valley, it did not matter whether they had avoided their territory. The territories which had been marked as dangerous beforehand were probably already empty. At the beginning, Lin Li encountered some magical beasts that were almost level 20, such as the shining wing moth, the silver-maned bear king, and many others. Those would never detect Lin Li because of the stealth potion that he had ingested, and also because they were not legendary yet. Hence, he was just like thin air to them. However, when a real legendary magical beast appeared, Lin Li still had to slow down despite having the help of the stealth potion. Level 20 was also a huge threshold for magical beasts to develop qualitative changes. The legendary magical beasts not only enjoyed a great increase in power, but also had different detection abilities that were worlds apart from those of the other magical beasts below the legendary realm. Although Lin Li was confident in his own potion, most people failed because they were overly confident. Lin Li did not wish to make such a mistake. The truth proved that Lin Li's concerns were not uncalled for. The chimera with evil wings clearly detected something, gliding in circles slightly above his head, even though it did not discover his presence. It was Lin Li's second encounter with the magical beast, chimera. His first was in Tutankhamun's wooden hut in the Blackstone Mountains. Through the space-time beacon, he saw Jaresco's battle with the Evil Eye Tyrant, during which a four-headed chimera was the first to appear. However, that four-headed chimera was different from the two-headed one now above Lin Li, which had two goat-like heads, a lion's body, a snake's tail, and huge black wings. However, the chimera was not a pushover just because it had only two heads. It was actually another species of chimera, which was not the same as a four-headed chimera. Although it did not have the magical prowess of a four-headed chimera, it had immense physical strength, and was much more proficient in wind and fire magic. The chimera with evil wings growled in a low voice, and hovered above Lin Li, seemingly having sensed something and wondering why it couldn't find anything. Lin Li dared not speed up even though he did not have to fear the evil wing chimera given his abilities. He would definitely have a hard time if his presence was detected. He was well aware of the purpose of his visit. He was not there to hunt and kill the rare magical beasts even though they were hard to find. He wanted to successfully obtain Thunderbolt and the other important items before the Manhwa family and Dark Blade did. There couldn't be any mistakes, then. Lin Li carefully moved deeper into the valley. The evil wing chimera finally turned around and flew away, perhaps because Lin Li had already stepped into the territory of another magical beast. However, Lin Li did not feel that relieved, for there had to be a formidable beast there since the chimera actually left without a fight. Time passed minute by minute, together with Lin Li's footsteps. The depth of the valley truly did not disappoint him. After shunning all the powerful magical beasts, he did not encounter any other terrifying entities along the rest of his journey. Hence, he could not help but speed up again. He could sense the faint and subtle signal that seemed to be becoming clearer. He was certain that the suspected target was right in front. After making a turn, Lin Li suddenly stopped in his tracks and looked in front in astonishment, only to realize that it was a different scene from before. The bright moon in the sky seemed to be larger, brighter, and rounder than before. Although it was nighttime, the silvery moonlight that was cast on the ground seemed to have lit up the world. In the open, the trees were sparse and the sounds of insects could be heard. There were wild flowers complementing the lush greenery, and he could no longer smell the stench of deciduous leaves, which had been replaced by the smell of grass and the faint aroma of wild flowers. A small stream flowed from the side. The sounds of water flowing and the occasional croaking of toads was rather soul-cleansing. They even made Lin Li forget about the pressure that he faced along the way. Lin Li could not remember when was the last time he ever saw such a beautiful scenery. Or perhaps he had never noticed any before. Everything in front of him seemed rather dreamy and surreal to Lin Li, though it was not his first time seeing such sceneries. Perhaps Lin Li was getting emotional because the tranquility was a stark contrast to the intense battle that he just had. However, Lin Li did not indulge in it, and only got distracted for a brief moment before remembering his purpose. He was not there to play or relax and unwind. Who knew what kind of danger or crisis there might be beneath this calmness? Lin Li snapped out of his trance and stopped admiring the scenery. Instead, he scrutinized the objects in front of him. Like he expected, he discovered a peculiar entity in a certain spot. Deep in the woods, there seemed to be a hazy halo, which made it impossible for him to see what was hidden behind it. Lin Li dared not be careless at all, and he felt that he ought to be even more careful at this moment. Otherwise, there would be no time for him to even lament and regret. Instead of walking forth immediately, he carefully siphoned out a portion of mental strength and looked into the hazy halo. As his mental strength extended, Lin Li began to frown slightly. He unconsciously pressed his lips together, and the doubtful gaze in his eyes became more intense. The surrounding scenery, the pleasing insects, and the sounds of the water flowing could no longer entice him or catch his attention. A portion of his mental strength was already controlled by his mind. That portion of mental strength did not touch the halo yet, but when it was approaching it, Lin Li could sense a faint aura that seemed a little familiar. Lin Li's eyes widened suddenly before acting normally again, though he was not truly composed. It was the menace of the dragon. Lin Li was rather familiar with the menace of the dragon, which he personally encountered during the battle with the adult Crimson Dragon in the underground palace in the Dragon Mountains. However, at this moment, he could feel that this menace of the dragon was much purer than that of the Crimson Dragon. It was the true menace of the dragon which was exhibited because of genetics. Only pure-blooded WYRMS would possess real menace of the dragon. Lin Li thought to himself that he was really unfortunate. Although it was to be expected that it wouldn't be easy to achieve his goal, he did not expect to encounter an actual WYRM here. It was no joke at all. Back then in the underground palace in the Dragon Mountains, he faced only a crimson dragon which had been imprisoned for over 1,000 years and had its mobility restricted. Yet, he was faced with an actual WYRM now. It was a fact that was impossible to fake. When faced with such circumstances, anyone would choose to go back to where they came from because that seemed to be the best and only option at hand. An actual WYRM was definitely one of the most powerful creatures in the world. Fighting against a real WYRM was simply an act of seeking death, and only those who courted death would stay. Indeed, the WYRM was something to be worshipped even for a legendary figure. However, Lin Li obviously wouldn't be willing to give up just like that. It was not like him to retreat when things got difficult. Besides, he was bent on getting his hands on Thunderbolt. Lin Li temporarily suppressed the suspicion in his heart, and used a portion of mental strength to continue exploring the halo. However, he was surprised even before he got near it. A mysterious force that came out of nowhere actually disrupted his mental strength. In the world of Anril, Lin Li did enjoy all kinds of advantages and privileges, but that did not make him the least bit arrogant. He wouldn't be conceited either. Lin Li had a clear understanding of his mental strength and abilities. Apart from his natural talent, the magical crystal of the evil-eyed tyrant that had been left behind by Juresco had been helping him increase his mental strength every day. It was more of a mental training than an increase in strength. Therefore, Lin Li was still rather confident in his own mental strength. Even though he had only activated a portion of it, the degree of condensation of the mental strength would not change. Moreover, it was not only for exploration or casting mental spells. Few people could reach such a high level of penetrating power. However, his mental strength was disrupted by an unknown force before he could even find anything. Lin Li couldn't help but feel shocked. At the same time, he had also become much more conscientious and determined. Hence, he refused to give up, and decided to take another look at the halo. This time, Lin Li did not act recklessly, but instead used some skills that had been taught in the Book of Eternity to better control his mental strength. The Book of Eternity was a journal of Juresco's magical experience throughout his life, and the importance of mental strength to a mage was second only to the perception of the rule power. Or perhaps they were of equal importance. Hence, there were naturally skills and techniques regarding exercising mental strength included in the Book of Eternity. How could Lin Li not pick them up? Lin Li's not-so-handsome face began to grow exceptionally sullen, and he closed his eyes together slightly while everything else around him seemed to have been shielded out. He was entirely focused on controlling that portion of his mental strength. Controlling one's mental strength was actually harder to execute than it seemed because it was not composed of magic elements like magic, but rather was an abstract and intangible entity. Hence, there had yet to be one established technique for the training of mental strength in Anril. Only Juresco, the god of mages, had researched on it and recorded his input in the Book of Eternity. Although Lin Li had only siphoned a portion of his mental strength, he had to use all of it to control the mental strength, and the technique taught by Juresco was not that easy to employ, especially with Lin Li's current level. He was still too far away from Juresco's standards, hence, he was just doing his best to use the techniques as well as possible. Juresco was undeniably worthy of his title as the god of mages. Lin Li once again tried to explore and study the halo, using the mental strength manipulation techniques taught in the Book of Eternity. Although he encountered certain obstacles, he finally penetrated through the halo using his mental strength. However, Lin Li's doubts had not been resolved because of that, but became a little bit more intense instead. He felt that the magical aura in the halo was the exact one that he had been chasing and looking for. Hence, he began to get even more muddled up. Lin Li used the 3 pieces of the debris of the stars that he had, holy light, rebirth, and darkness, to detect the aura of Thunderbolt in the Haiga mountain range. He cooperated with the Manhwa family and the Dark Blade to explore the Haiga mountain range, all for the sake of Thunderbolt. He then left the battlefield alone, and followed the signal all the way to the valley, likewise for the sake of Thunderbolt. However, he now began to doubt his detection. Lin Li was no stranger to the magical aura of the WYRM. The powerful existence of the ancient dragons that dominated the prehistoric era was still extremely domineering, even if it was only in terms of its magical aura. That was precisely the reason that the magical aura of a WYRM was unique and couldn't be imitated. It was a solitary trait of domination and repression, just like a ruler who was majestic and self-righteous, with no tolerance for disrespect. The magical aura of WYRMS would never allow itself to coexist with the magical aura of other beings. That was the indelible nature of WYRMS, which gave them their pride. Thank you for watching Mystic Realms Recap. Please like, share and subscribe. Have a great day.